Like,
okay.
I don't know.
Professor, my question, you mentioned before about the potential conflict in the future with China, and over the last few days, reading on various different newspaper sources and other sources, I found that the U.S. is proposing an international partnership to go into space, which includes every spacefaring nation in the EU, Russia, and Japan, but leaves China out. Number two, the U.S. visa requirements have been altered specifically against China and for the U.S.'s reciprocal nations to focus against Chinese citizens to make it much more difficult for them to obtain visas. And number three, wait, what was number three? Okay, anyway, I can't remember it right now, but there was a third specific issue in which the U.S. was showing extreme bias against China or China's allies in particular. And mentioning with what you were before, how you're looking like this may be the future way of which international competition between these countries is going to go, what is your thought on this? Do you think that this can be stopped before we get into another Cold War type situation?
Yeah, what's the source on the agreement about excluding China from the international space thing? I didn't see it. Yeah.
I read in the BBC, in the New York Times, on Guardian, and in the Chinese news.
If you could do me a favor and email it to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to see it because I missed it. But it makes sense. I mean, if you ask, for example, why is China trying to carry out a moonshot? I mean, I don't know what's in their heads, but I think a possible guess is that they are challenging the U.S. doctrine of ownership of space. You know, they're saying, no, we're not going to allow you to own space. A moonshot, you know, undoubtedly is going to be part of the militarization of space program. And they're saying, well, you know, you're not going to get a free ride. The U.S. is very much worried about Northeast Asia for very good reasons. Northeast, not just China, also Japan and South Korea and so on. Northeast Asia is the most it's the most dynamic economic area in the world. It's growing much faster than anywhere else. It's got a GDP well beyond that of the U.S. It has major industrial economies, Japan and South Korea. China's growing, has plenty of resources in eastern Siberia. A lot of the jockeying in the Middle East now, but which way the pipelines go and so on and so forth, has to do with this. Has to do with the U.S. trying to maintain control over energy resources so that Northeast Asia doesn't have its own independent resources, and they have plenty right in the region. So that's a major area of potential conflict, and China is right at the heart of it. On the other hand, the U.S. is ambivalent towards China, because on the one hand, it, strategically speaking, it regards it as a potential threat. I mean, on the other hand, for Walmart and Dell and so on, China is just a gift. I mean, it has super cheap, hopelessly exploited labor under miserable conditions, rotten human rights laws, and so on and so forth. So that's just perfect for investment or for getting cheap goods for Walmart and so on. So there's kind of a split. I mean, what's called the Chinese economy is very largely foreign-owned, mostly by overseas Chinese, in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and so on, but also by U.S. corporations, big ones, Microsoft, Dell, So there's a kind of a split, and it's hard to know which way it'll go. The U.S. is trying to get China to open up. China has not followed the neoliberal rules, and like other countries that haven't followed them, it has developed. But there's a big effort being made to compel it to do so, which would mean, for example, to compel it to open up its financial institutions to U.S. takeover. That was the third one? Yeah. U.S., yeah. They want them to fiddle with the exchange rate, but more fundamental than that is to let U.S. banks take over the Chinese financial system. Once you succeed in doing that, a country has lost its sovereignty. I mean, that's why they forced that on Iraq. They got to allow the whole thing to be taken over by U.S. institutions. And it's not clear that China will agree to that. And that's a major source of conflict. I think you're right.